The world is changing faster than we ever could have imagined. We're losing our freedoms, our jobs, and even our loved ones. And everything we've worked so hard to build is falling apart at the seams. We've placed our hopes in the courts, the audits, the military, the media, Barr, Durham, Trump, and the entire system designed to protect us. And one by one, we've been left hanging, and we're tired. Some of us are truly exhausted, and some are starting to lose hope. I know. And there's nothing I can say to make this any easier for you. A while back, they told us to grab our popcorn and enjoy the show. And we tried to believe them. But it's quickly becoming the kind of horror movie that only the darkest minds can bear. So I'm not here today to try to give you a false sense of hope. I'm here to give you a rational assessment of our current situation. And I'll explain why I believe that what's crumbling more than anything right now is the illusion, and why we're not entering the dark ages, but coming out of it. And yes, there are going to be real world challenges and consequences in the battle ahead. Why? Because it's a battle, just like every other battle. So we have to be sober. But stick with me today, and I'm going to show you all the cracks that are appearing in the fortress and how courage is piercing through stronger and brighter than ever before. I'm going to show you how truth is shattering lies and awakening folks who've been asleep their whole lives. And I'm going to show you how what's at the end of this tunnel isn't a dystopian hellhole, but freedom, truth, and justice like we've never seen before. So hold the line and join me for today's show. Welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is an important show, and you'll see as the show unravels why that is. But I think that a lot of us are just having a hard time. Last night, I put a message out on Telegram, which I do commonly, just saying, "Hey, how are you doing? What are you thinking about? What's weighing on your mind?" And in only a few hours, I got probably six or 700 comments. And I had to say the majority of the comments were people concerned, worried about the mandates, worried about the border, the audits, what's happening with the White House. Is Trump going to come back? What's Durham doing? And I think just fearful of what's happening. A lot of people are losing their jobs. A lot of people have loved ones that are dying from the mandates are pushing. And I think so I really felt like that today's show really needed to look into how I view what's happening in the world, because while it seems like things are really, really dark and scary, there's actually a lot of reasons why we should have hope, and why there are actually real things that are happening, but they're not happening if you look at them from a certain perspective. And that's a lot of what I want to try to do today is I want to help frame what I believe is happening, because I think that that's really, really key. And so, before I jump into the show, though, I'll just say that in terms of the little bit of house cleaning or housekeeping notes here, if you do want to follow me on social media, I highly recommend you follow me on Telegram. The link for my Telegram channel is below in the description. It's just Man in America over there on Telegram. There's other fake channels, but just make sure it's Man in America. This show is broadcasting live on YouTube, on Rumble, and on Rise TV. So on YouTube, so because I'm on YouTube, which is where I can reach the greatest audience, which is this is an information war, I have to reach more people, which is why I choose to exist on these communist-owned platforms. So you'll see that I have a little bit of self-censorship on there. But you know what I'm saying. So I just be careful what certain keywords I can't mention. But if you do want to watch it on Rumble, I highly recommend supporting Rumble instead of YouTube. And if you've already joined me over on Rise TV, you can always watch it on Rise TV, which is risetv.com or www.risetv. And for those of you that want to watch it on Rise TV, after the show, I always do over on Rise a uncensored, very kind of more personal Q&A with the folks that are watching on Rise TV. If you want a free trial to Rise, it's in the description below. I'm one of the people behind Rise TV. So by supporting Rise TV, you're supporting me and allowing me to be out there, because I will continue to put out the really important content like this to the masses. And it's just, I feel like it's my duty. I feel like it's what God has chosen me to do. And so there we go. All right. So digging into today's show, there's a handful of things I want to talk about. I want to start though with an article by Brian Cates. Maybe you're familiar with Brian Cates. I first discovered him through the Epoch Times. He writes columns for there. I agree with a lot of what he says, not everything he says, but that's the beauty of researching and discernment. Not everyone's going to be 100% in agreement with what you think, but I really try to look at everything I can look at and just discern where the truth is. And so Brian's perspective that he presents in this article is actually really, really good. So I want to start with going through his article because this article really helps frame what's happening. And this article sets the foundation for a lot of things I'm going to talk about in today's show. Because as I mentioned in the intro, as I mentioned in the description for the show, I actually believe that we are winning. And I know that it's frightening. I know it seems like we're not. You look around, it's like, Seth, are you insane? Are you so drugged up on hopium that you can't see the reality of the border and the audits and where's Trump and Trump's pushing the jab and all these things? It's like, look, I know it's tough. I know it's tough. And I've got some personal experiences to share with you about things I've had to walk through in this process, but I'm not blind to this. Okay. I'm not, just hiding my head in the sand thinking it's all going to be okay. I really do believe that. And I'm going to get into it today. So let me go and start. I'm going to bring up this article from Brian Cates, which he published on X22's website here. Give me 1 second to pull it up. Okay. I'll let you see me too, my smiling face. There you go. So it's called, it sounds like it's an X22 headline. The system is panicking. The narrative no longer has you. Hold the line. The enemy is cracking. That's such a Dave headline. But anyway, this is Brian Cates. So I'm going to read through this with you first, because again, this is what sets the tone for a lot of what I'm going to talk about. So he says, and there's a few parts I'll skip. That's okay. And just so you know, all these links are in the description below the video. So if you want to follow along, if you want to read these, if you want to share them, great. And one final thing is if you want to share this video, please help me. YouTube, all the platforms, they really limit. They stop me from being able to share. They stop me from being able to grow. So I'm able to grow and find more people by you actually sharing. So if you have a friend that might enjoy this, or you have a fellow patriot that's hanging his head low lately, say, hey, check out this video from Man in America. This guy has some really, really rational reasons why we're not actually heading into a dystopian hellhole. So on to Brian's article. Okay, it says, this present constant drumbeat of COVID and mandate hysteria by the mainstream media, from fear-mongering politicians, big tech oligarchs, and corporate interests, all results in one smothering cultural voice inside Big Brother's matrix. It can literally feel like the entire world has gone insane. I'm sure you can identify with that, but it hasn't. Because what you're seeing on your electronic devices is not the real world. There are mass protests going on now all over the globe as people fight for their rights and liberties in the face of an encroaching and increasingly naked tyranny. But you won't know anything about this, and you'll see little, if any, of it if you keep your eyes fixed on Big Brother's networks or scan Big Brother's big tech social media platforms. Because Big Brother is always watching and tightly controlling what people are allowed to see. Only in the media world, controlled by people like Zuckerberg, are we losing. Only in the media world is the mandate working. Is Biden doing a heck of a job, etc. Tune it out. Unplug from the Big Brother matrix. Spending too much time watching the illusions being carefully and craftily created for fake news channels and websites, it's going to warp your perception of what's really happening across this country. Fake news this is a really important one. Fake news is not just fake news, it's something much more nefarious. Okay? Fake news is designed to attempt to unbalance your mind and to put you into a state in which you can be either controlled, more easily controlled by the state, or led into doing something rash and stupid that can be used to further the tyrannical causes of the state. My brother Dwayne Cates calls this the soul war, and I believe that is quite accurate. There's a war on for the soul of every American. And I think it's not just the Americans. I think that this is the war for the soul of people across the world. Scared, terrified, and paranoid people are paralyzed, or they act out in violent and irrational ways. That's how the vile cabal behind all this insanity of the past year and a half wants you to be right now. As you watch the news media they control, use the big tech platforms they own, read the magazines and books they published. They publish scared, terrified, paranoid, and paralyzed, or making plans to do something stupid. They would prefer you become pacified and paralyzed because then you'll very likely do what you're told to do in order that things may soon get back to normal. It's so easy. All you must do is comply, but they're lying to you. The more you comply, the more they change everything. Right now, they're in the midst of rolling out an endless regime of booster shots, even as they attempt to implement mandates on entire populations. You are not going to comply your way out of this present tyranny. I want to read that again. You are not going to comply your way out of this present tyranny. The madness only ends when enough people stand up and say, no, I won't. A lot of the problems in American society right now would sort themselves out if most people would just tune out the fake news media and get off their big tech platforms. Now, I know that a lot of you aren't watching CNN, aren't watching MSNBC, but even Fox is pushing a lot of the same narratives here. And if we have friends and family that are sucked into this, if we can help them pull those cords, like the matrix cords out of the back of their head that are publishing and showing CNN, MSNBC, help them get off of that, we're going to help them as well significantly. If all you watch is the fake news, you don't know anything about the mass protests that are taking place all over the world. The mainstream corporate media is not going to show you any real look at the millions of citizens who've been rising up to protest against their local tyrants. A deliberate impression is created that the bad guys are not only winning, but they are also winning easily in their long, uninterrupted march to making the US and much of the Western world into totalitarian states. What utter bullshit. Quit watching the illusion. Come back to reality. We live in a transitory time. Some people don't believe the country will ever emerge from the state it has ended up in since what happened November 3rd. I'm not one of those people. The media's job right now is to make things look 10 times worse than they really are, to fill you with fear, a feeling of being isolated, dependent, and helpless. Part of your resistance to the fake news media, the big tech oligarchs, and the corporate monopolists is to shut them out of your life. As long as you are watching their news or using their platforms or services, you're empowering them to control you, to influence your behavior, to limit and control your speech. The reason they make frequent use of some of the most publicly visible people like movie stars, athletes, and other celebrities to push their current narratives is to sell the idea that they have ironclad control of our culture, but they don't. There is an illusory Vanity Fair culture they control. And then there's the real American culture that exists outside the cabal's media bubble. This is a really, really important point, what he's talking about with the Vanity Fair culture. Many Americans have been shocked over the past year or so into waking and realizing they have been immersing themselves in this fake Vanity Fair version of the world created by these elite sophists on the news networks in their books and magazines, their movies, TV shows, music, and more. They are unplugging from the fake version of the world, and there shall be no going back for them. That's really important. I'm going to talk about that more in this episode later, is that there's no going back to that life, and that's a good thing. So I see folks are just coming on. They're asking what am I reading from. This is an article that Brian Cates published on x22report.com. The link is in the video description below if you want to follow along. I usually don't like to read this much, but Brian's a great writer, and he really captured exactly what I wanted to start framing the conversation with. He says, "Hold the line. The enemy is cracking. The shadow cabal can't bluff for much longer. They never counted on the level of mass non-compliance they are seeing to their draconian power grabs. Right now, as a short-term stopgap fix, some governors are deploying their state's National Guard force to staff hospitals and schools where employees have been fired for defying mandates. Maybe when tens of thousands of airline pilots walk off the job, they can have the National Guard fly the planes too. But there simply aren't enough National Guard to staff both the hospitals and the public schools, or fly the planes, or run the trains, or drive the buses. These out of touch politicians can issue all the mandates they want. They have no legal way to enforce them, and the sooner everyone figures that out, the better off we'll all be. Companies that are following illegal orders issued by politicians are going to be left twisting in the wind on their own when they get sued by the employees they fired over refusing the jab." Biden and Newsom will be nowhere to be found when these business owners suffer judgments against them in the millions of dollars. It's going to be massive. So Biden bluffed, idiots fell for it. Understand what happened here. The White House claimed a national OSHA law was coming and that the federal workforce, state governors, and business owners had better get a head start and institute their own private mandates on their own to show good faith in complying with the coming OSHA regulation. But Biden and his White House team have been bluffing this entire time. They know full well what would happen if OSHA began trying to enforce a mandate. The courts would instantly issue injunctions and shut it all down. 25 plus states would instantly sue Biden's admin in the courts. When pressed, White House spokesperson Jennifer Psaki has admitted that nobody really knows when this much talked about OSHA rule is going to officially take an effect. The strategy that's emerging has been one of bluffing private companies into instituting their own private mandates, even though no such law has yet been implemented. This is really important. There hasn't even been a draft of such regulation or law presented yet. Now, for those of you watching, I know that there have been companies that have been issuing this, right? And there are people that have been losing their jobs, especially people that are say in the medical professions or pilots or air stewardess, et cetera, teachers. But the important point here is that there's no law, there's no legal precedent for this. So if you were smart and you forced your job to fire you over this, you have a lot of legal strengths. I know it's difficult right now, but this will come back around. And there's another article I'm going to show you um, after this to give you some more information about that. So Biden's controllers are doing more to wake up Americans than anyone else. The fact that we had things very good under Trump and so many things have become truly awful so very quickly under this current illegitimate president in the White House will lead to another dichotomy between the fake world and the real world that is going to wake up many of our American brethren who still slumber in the big tech matrix. This is absolutely correct. I'm just going to share a thought here that I got a text message from my mom 2 days ago. There's a really good family friend of ours who was a staunch Biden supporter. And that she texted and she said, "Hey, I just heard from Bill, and Bill said that he's officially regretted voting for Biden and he's coming around." So this is someone that, again, was very strong on the liberal agenda and everything. So people are waking up. I know folks have said, "Well, no one around me is waking up." They are and they will. I know it's difficult, but be patient. They really are following. Okay, so I'm going to skip down just because that's just about people waking up, but I want to skip to where this gets to at the end here. The naked face of tyranny revealed. This is very important. You could not tell people what they would do. Hardly anyone would have believed you that these elitist political class snobs would drop their mask and reveal themselves to be authoritarian tyrants. People had to experience the tyranny to forever reject those who sought to impose it upon them. In short, to save the country from these cabal members, they had to be led to believe it was now safe to drop their masks and show their true naked face to the people they mean to rule over. In doing so, they have now destroyed themselves forever. The process of their destruction shall not be instantaneous, however. It will take some time for it to be accomplished by the little people. We are now living in a transitional age. Such times are always difficult. Suffering is involved and difficult, and many times tragic sacrifices have to be made. It's easy to give up, to just give in and comply. It requires no effort from you, but it will cost you and your children and your children's children everything. People who've given up are always looking for someone else to be the scapegoat for their own lack of courage and their dereliction of their duty. The enemy seeks to convince you the battle was already lost long ago, that any effort you now make at fighting them is wasted and will be futile. Well, they lie to you about everything else, so of course they lie to you about this also. Only as long as enough Americans are in the grip of the Big Brother Matrix illusion can they keep their power. Resistance is futile, they tell us. In fact, resistance to their tyranny is your duty as a citizen. Here's a quote here from John Hancock. Resistance to tyranny becomes the Christian and social duty of each individual. Continue steadfast and with a proper sense of your dependence on God, nobly defend those rights which heaven gave, and no man ought to take away from us. There's a quote for you. The moment you stop resisting, you're not an American citizen any longer. you will have consented to be their serf. And once you become their serf, you will never be a citizen again. On social media, I encounter in some quarters endless whining. It's not fair that these troubles have come in our time. Well, life isn't about fairness. It never has been. If I had a nickel for every time I heard growing up that life's not fair, I'd be crying. I said, Mom, it's not fair. It's not fair. I said, Seth, life's not fair. I heard it so much. We don't get to choose our time. We can only make the decision to meet whatever challenges that arise to confront us with the best that is in us. Unplug from their matrix. Get involved at the level of government that truly matters, your local county. Make your voice heard. Let them know you have woken from your slumber and you will never sleep again. So that to me, that article sums up so much of what's happening right now. And it makes a lot of points that I'm going to touch upon. So a few of these points before I get into them. One is the act of resistance, the act of resisting tyranny. And what we're seeing right now is that that's happening massively within the airline industry. In the next article I'm going to show you really digs into how that's working. Okay. The other one is that he really paints a picture that they will only control us if we're living within their illusion. All right. That's a really important thing here. They maintain their control when we're inside of their world they've created for us. When we step out of that world, when we unplug, they don't control us anymore. In their world, the Constitution doesn't exist. It's been tossed down the paper shredder, then pissed on and burned. In my world, the Constitution is this golden, glowing document that governs everything I do and protects me from tyranny. Okay, it's important to get out of their world. So there's more things I'm going to touch upon what he talked about, but I want to show you quickly just an article I found, the best article that is summing up exactly what's happening with the airlines right now, what's happening with Southwest, what's starting to happen with the train systems. And this is showing exactly what we're going to see unfolding. Because as we look at where we're at in history right now, Biden put out his mandates. As Brian made a very good point in explaining, they're not law. Their mandates. All they're trying to do is they're trying to get private companies to feel like they have to do these things. But actually, these things won't stand up in court because we're protected by our Constitution. There's so many things that protect us against what's happening. So the importance, though, is to stand and hold the line and don't comply. So let me go ahead and show you, though, what's happening with the airlines here. So this next article I'm going to show you, which I believe this is Sherry Timpenny shared this on Telegram, which I have to thank her for finding that for us. So this next article here, let me pull it up for you. Sorry, 1 second. There we go. All right, so here we have, what's that doing? Okay. Southwest Airlines is collapsing, a glimpse of the future and hope. So keep in mind that this article was written by a guy named Charles Sam Faddis. So Charles was the previous director of the CIA's terrorist weapons of mass destruction unit. So this guy has a lot of strength behind his words. Okay. So showing you this now. Okay. And this is, I'll just read through this quickly because I don't want to be reading articles to you this whole time. But so Joe Biden's federal mandate is toothless. He cannot make it work. He cannot enforce it. And so the federal government has tried to backdoor a national mandate by pushing corporations to do their dirty work. Maybe the feds can't really order you to take the jab, but they can prevent you from earning a living without the jab. They can achieve the same objective. It seems simple enough and strangely fitting for a government that is increasingly indistinguishable from giant multinational corporations, big tech, and the oligarchs that run the entire enterprise. Except a funny thing is happening. The people, those Neanderthals clinging to their Bibles and guns who are supposed to do what they are told, pay taxes and fight the corporate wars, are pushing back. Deserted by their elected representatives who answer to their corporate masters, average Americans are refusing to comply. Take a look at Southwest Airlines. You'll see exactly what this new civil disobedience looks like. You may also see the future. The White House has pressed the airlines to adopt mandates using the leverage of federal contracts. United knuckled under first and announced a requirement, a jab requirement. Southwest recently announced its employees had until December 8th to get the jab or lose their jobs. The pilots union for Southwest responded to the mandate by filing suit and trying to block the action, but the pilots themselves are not waiting for court action to make it clear where they stand. They've started using vacation days and sick days and refusing to show up for work. Other employees have followed suit. Okay, so scrolling down here to capture. Or okay, what was it? Okay. Now, basically, so what he's saying is that so Southwest Airlines is continuing to maintain that there is no work stoppage in process and blaming cancellations on the weather, which I'm sure you've seen this happening. Okay. So the pilots unit is keeping silent because any official action on its part would likely be considered illegal. In reality, their position is largely true. Pilots are not calling out because they have been ordered to do so. They're calling out because they've had enough. Southwest pilots are drawing a line in the sand. They, like so many other Americans, are done with the creeping tyranny, and they have grasped that in Washington, no one is going to stand up for them and push back. It's time for citizens to act on their own. This is just the beginning, if not the end. Other airlines are already reported to be seeing the same issues as Southwest. Those issues will expand. Rumors are swirling that United pilots may join the sick out anytime. Amtrak, the massive train service provider, just announced the cancellation of several scheduled trains because personnel are not showing up to work. That expect that accept the expectation is that such actions will spread. Across the country in recent months, there's been an increased number of walkouts by various professional groups protesting the mandates. These have all been designed to bring attention to issues at hand. The Southwest action it took and those who follow are fundamentally different. The action by Southwest pilots is not designed to attract attention. It's designed to use economic leverage to compel Southwest to change course. The pilots are not saying they want a conversation. They're saying if you don't change your policy, they will destroy the company. Okay, so and kind of diving back in. So this is a key point here. Okay, is that this is just beginning. Okay, when this started happening, Southwest's stock started plummeting. They lost 4% over a couple of days. Okay, so what's going to happen? What's going to happen when more companies start doing this? As Brian Cates mentioned, you can only have so many National Guards show up for hospitals. They're going to start showing up what for airplanes, for school teachers, for everything. This is the thing. This is what happens when we, the people, fight back. Okay, and so what this as much as now again, as I mentioned, I know a lot of people are just saying, "Look, I lost my job. They fired me." Okay, look, I know it's difficult, but you did the right thing by not complying. And though there are some difficult times that we're experiencing, on the other side of this, I do believe that we're going to find a lot of hope and we're going to correct these things. But I want to, so that part of the show, I wanted to just kind of focus on what's happening with Southwest, talk about what Brian had to say, and show the real world examples of how people are resisting what's happening with these mandates and how fundamentally they're going to have a really, really hard time enforcing these because the reality is that my guess is it's not even half of the American population has actually gotten the jab. That's my guess. So what are they going to actually shut down entire economies over this under Biden? It's just not going to happen. Okay. So, but something though that I want to take a deeper look at is framing where we're at today. And this is really important. This is very, very important because so much of how we look at what's happening in our life is framing. Okay. And so this next tweet I'm going to show you really highlights what's happening and where we're at in history. Okay. So let's pull this up. Up until quite recently, I was very concerned that we're entering a new dark age. I'm now coming to believe that we've been in one all along and are just now beginning to make our escape. Okay, this is from James Lindsay. This I came across this on Twitter. Now, this is really, really important. This is probably one of the most important messages I could get across right now. Is I'm not sure how much you've done research into what people call the cabal or the shadow government or any of these names they refer to, the 13 families, all these things. Maybe 2 years ago, you would have said it's all tinfoil hat stuff. For me, it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I really started researching this stuff very heavily. There's a handful of books I started reading, and really learning about who's actually been in control of our world, not just our country, our world. And this is very, very important to understand, to frame what's happening right now. Because just like what Brian Cates said, talking about the Vanity Fair life, I think for a lot of us, especially those of us in America, say 10 years ago, maybe you're just pursuing your career, your kids are doing well, they went to Harvard, all the things that we're trained to think were good. But I think that we have to really, really understand and accept that our world has been in control, or has been controlled by very evil people for a very, very long time. Now, I'm not gonna dig into the Rothschilds or the 13 bloodlines or any of these things. I recommend you do your own research on those things, and if you wanna message me or leave a comment in Telegram, I can recommend some books to read. But this is something that it's very important to understand, is that we can't look at this and frame it from the perspective that 10 years ago, life was perfect. We're living in America, pursuing the American dream. It's like, no, since the founding of our country, since back in 1776, we have been fighting, the Americans have been fighting against a corrupt cabal that has had immense power in this world. These people, a lot of it is based with the European banks. A lot of it ties into now China and the CCP, the UN, right? These are people that, and even though America was founded, it's not like that's when the evil started. These people have been in control for thousands of years. There's been a battle of good and evil coming, or that has been playing out, and it's really emerging now. And so, as much as people, you want to think, I want to get back to normal, the reality is that just like that person said, just like James Lindsay said in his tweet, is that while it feels like we are entering into a dark age, we've been in a dark age for a very, very long time, and we're just now coming out of it. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the allegory of the cave by Plato, right? He made it this beautiful analogy of all these people that were in shackles within a cave. And they were the people that were controlling them were using fire to cast shadows on the wall. And those shadows were fake, but they used those shadows to control the people that were locked up. Now, one person realized they were in a cave and went outside and saw that there was sunlight and freedom. Even when that person went back in and told the people that there was actually sunlight and freedom, they didn't believe that person. And it's similar to the Matrix. That's the best way to describe where we're at. So where we're at today, and you have to look at it like this, is that there is no normal that we're going to get back to. Like, we are going to have to go through a very fundamental change, because the evil that we're seeing today rear its ugly head. It might look like it's Trudeau. It might look like it's Biden. It might look like it's Xi Jinping. It might look like it's Klaus Schwab. The reality is that these people are part of lineages and part of control structures that have been in place for a very, very long time. But evil is strongest when no one can see it. And so that's a really important thing to understand, is that right now, the reason why it feels like there's so much evil in our world is that it's not like the world became much more evil. This evil has always existed in our world, and not always, maybe, but basically since even before Christ's time. Like, why do you think people that were on earth that crucified Christ? Do you think that they weren't maybe the same families and types of people, the ones that crucified Christ, the same ones that have through their lineages and kept the evil in the world? Doesn't that show you how long there have been very evil people in control of our world? So we have to realize, is that what's happening right now is we are awakening from that, right? Even, and I know, look, it's tough, and look, if you want to go research this, I really recommend it. There's some different books you can look at. There's one book I'd recommend. It's called "Behold a Pale Horse." It's right. It's maybe Marco, if you'll put that in the comments. But "Behold a Pale Horse." And it's one of the books that really opened my eyes to things. But we have to really understand that this this evil's been in control, and that right now, like, what's happening is that we're seeing through it. But these people, though, again, if you look back at what was normal 10 years ago, we haven't been taught the truth of our world. We haven't been taught true science. We haven't been given the right medicine. We've been taught the Rockefellers seized control of the medical industry a long time ago. Holistic doctors, a lot of ancient wisdom for healing has been completely disappeared. Cures for cancer, alternative energy sources, everything have been removed from us, right? So it's really, really important that we understand that even the world we thought we grew up in that was normal, these people have been controlling things for a very long time. And what we're going through right now is the destruction of their system. It's the destruction of the old guard. And it's going to be difficult. And look, I know that there's certain people, because as I mentioned before, I asked people within the Telegram group, I said, hey, how are you doing? And people are struggling. People are really, really struggling. And I want to talk to some of that struggles, shortly as well. But what's also really important is that we're going through a tough time. It's going to be difficult. When we were in World War II, people died. It didn't mean that we're losing the war. There are going to be casualties. We're going to lose jobs. We're going to have friends and family that stop talking to us. We're going to have that uncle or that grandmother that dies because of medical treatment that they've been forced into. There are going to be really difficult times for us, but the bigger picture is what's happening is that we're emerging from that dark age. We're emerging from the cave, right? And the people, the elites that are controlling us, they are absolutely frightened. They are frightened, which I'm going to get to that. Now, what's also happening is that they are no longer they're no longer trying to uphold the illusion. And that's the thing, is that we're in this precipice where they have to then force us into their next stage of things. But we're resisting. But what's happening though is that the illusion they've maintained for us, it's shattered. We are not like, look at how much life has changed in the past 2 years. They have torn down the entire illusion around us. And now we're seeing what it really is. We're seeing the control they have over us. Let's use Australia as an example. Do you think that the tyranny that you see in Australia didn't exist 10 years ago or 5 years ago? It existed. They had that power 5 years ago. They didn't implement it. They allowed people to exist within this illusion of freedom, but now they're rolling it out. And that's what's happening. So there's a quote that I want to show you that I think is really, really, really powerful, actually. So let me pull this up for you. This is Frank Zappa. The illusion of freedom will continue as long as it's profitable to continue the illusion. At the point where the illusion becomes too expensive to maintain, they will just take down the scenery, they will pull back the curtains, they will move the tables and chairs out of the way, and you will see the brick wall at the back of the theater. Powerful. That's where we are. That's exactly what Brian Cates was referring to when Brian Cates was talking about the elites, them pulling their masks off, them exposing themselves. And this is such a critical time for this. We have to understand it and frame things properly. They're now revealing themselves. We're seeing them for who they are. But what's really important to understand is that they're actually afraid of us. Think about it. Think about press conferences. Think about when Trudeau recently announced their mandates for air travel and train travel. Think about some of the videos you've seen of the Australian politicians talking. Think about Biden speaking about the mandates and turning his back. All of these things show that they're scared of us. They're nervous. They don't have the control over everything in our lives that they want us to think that they do. I'm being very serious here. Next time you go up there and watch Jen Psaki. Watch Jen Psaki's body language. She knows she's lying. She knows we see through her. She hates her job. She hates getting up in front of people and spewing this stuff because they're losing control. It's one thing if we're all just like blind idiots, like, yes, ma'am, Jen Psaki, you're correct. That's not us, though. We're seeing through things. And so I'm being really serious. So next time you watch some of these politicians, watch them talking. Watch them talking about what they're doing to us. You can see it. They're nervous. They're nervous because they're losing control of us. And this is so important for us to understand. This is so critical because when we think that they're in control, it weakens our resolve. It weakens how we feel. It weakens our power. But when we realize how much power that we have, when we realize that every single voice that stands up and goes to a board meeting, why do you think the school board meetings, why do you think the DOJ is now calling upon the FBI to go after parents? This is some of the best news I've heard. Why? Because it shows you how frightened they are. 2 years ago, I think most parents didn't care what was happening at their local school board. Now, look what's happening. You've got these mama bears showing up and ripping into these school boards. You have people showing up and quoting the Nuremberg trials and everything. They are scared of this. The thing is, when you can reframe your thinking, you can start to see how scared they are. Why would the DOJ be coming after parents? Really? It's like, okay, that's strange. It's because they're scared of the parents. Now, will they actually have any kind of legal precedent to go after those parents? Look what happened January 6th. They huffed and puffed and made it think it was going to be so, like they're going to come down, they're going to have their January 6th commission. And look, I know that there's been people that have been in prison, which it's just terrible, but nothing's come out of it. It's been a flop. They don't have the control they want you to think. Now, there's a video I want to show you, just a short video. There's a journalist and a researcher and a scholar named Neil Oliver. He's over in Europe. And I want to show you a quick video that he put out there that I think is really important. So check this out really quick.
There's fear in the air. There's no mistaking it. It's made all the more noticeable by the fact Britain has never, not in my memory at least, been a fearful place. And for the longest time, the British have not been a fearful people. I remember unrest and discontent, of course I do. I remember righteous anger, but I don't remember the smell of fear. I say the strongest smell of fear, not just here, but elsewhere in countries of the developed West, is emanating not from the ordinary people, but from the leaders of governments, leaders of giant corporations. There are plenty of frightened citizens as well, masked up and isolated, driven to distraction by months, now years of mismanagement, misinformation and propaganda, all of it combining to create a wearying, debilitating sense of constant anxiety and uncertainty. But the strongest smell of fear comes not from those at the bottom of the pile, rather from those at the top. And what are they so frightened of, these governments and leaders? I'll tell you what, they're frightened of their own people. They're frightened of us, and there are a lot of us. It wasn't until the...
He says it pretty well, doesn't he? And something about his accent, anyway, it just comes across. I really like that guy. But again, powerful point. The fear comes from them. And this is so important because as we stand together, I think a lot of you are watching you're on a precipice. You're being forced. You've got a deadline coming. And they're saying, do this or else. Do this or else. We have to stand up. This is the time that we have to hold to our values, hold to the Constitution. What is it that makes the Constitution real? It's we, the people, holding it dear. That's what makes the Constitution real. The Constitution is just a document. It's just a piece of paper sitting somewhere. Okay? But what makes it real is the idea it represents. What makes it real is the strength it gives us when we hold to its principles. And this is what's really, really critical right now is we have to realize, like, if you don't have a copy of the Constitution, get a copy of it. Hang it in your living room for all I care. Great. But we have to realize that for those of us in America, which the whole world is relying on us, they're watching us, the Constitution is there for us. But it will not protect us if we do not hold it dear to ourselves. You're right. So when they come to do something to you, or when they want to, you say, look, this is you want a passport? This is my passport. This is the Constitution. And if it's a business that's not going to support that, if it's a business that does not want to honor the Constitution of the United States of America, you bring your business elsewhere. And when more of us do that, you'll see these businesses shutting down. You'll see what's happening with Southwest Airlines. You'll see what's happening with restaurants that are going out of business in New York because they're pushing the mandates and no one's eating there anymore. This is it. We, the people, have power. And what's also really key right now is that we're reaching a precipice. We're reaching the point where they're trying everything they can do. They're trying their news media. They're trying their celebrities, just like Brian Cates talked about. They're trying everything they can do to force us into a situation. All we have to do is say, I will not comply. I will not comply. And now, again, I'm not saying that you sit around saying I'm not going to comply. Of course, you want to get involved in your local school board, get involved in your local, political things. Get involved with sharing information, helping your friends and family and neighbors see the truth, help them realize what's happening. But what's key is that they are they're at this precipice, and we just have to hold the line. It's like Braveheart, Mel Gibson, hold, right? When William Wallace is on his horse and he's telling everyone, hold, like that's what we have to hold right now as we the people. Okay. And so now one thing I do want to talk about is just there are people that again, in the Telegram comments, I can feel it. There are people that are saying, I lost my job. I can't, I'm going to have a hard time, paying for my kids. I'm going to have a hard time this. I can no longer see my father. I've lost a family member. And so I wanted to just share a little more of my own personal story as it relates to these things, because perhaps that could be helpful to you. Perhaps that could be something that can maybe inspire you or help you look for things. So first I'll talk about just some of the changes that we're experiencing in our lives, right? So we've already discussed the fact that what we were living in before really was an illusion, and it was propped up, just like the Frank Zappa quote. If they wanted to enforce these things 10 years ago, they probably could have done it, right? Like I said with Australia, it's not like the tyranny and the powers there, they just happened. They've been like that for a very long time. Even in America, they've been intentionally eroding at our rights for a very, very long time. They just hadn't implemented it. Now they have, and we're seeing these things play out. But for a lot of people, though, what's really important is that we have to reframe how we're looking at the situation. Because if you look at the situation and you say, I just want to go back to normal, you have to accept that normal doesn't exist anymore. The white picket house and the white picket fence house and the nice job and, like the beautiful school district, that stuff just doesn't exist anymore. And the sooner you can realize that, and sooner you can realize that what we're transitioning to is we're going through a purge. We're going through a purge of the evil in this world. And so everything that we knew before is going to change. And there might be very difficult times ahead of us. I truly believe that. I think that we're going to see issues with supply chain. We might be seeing a lot of death. There will be tough times ahead of us, but we're exiting, just like the tweet I shared with you. We're not entering into a dark age. We've been in a dark age all along, and we're exiting it now. And they're trying their final plan, but it's failing. Okay. So for those of us that just want to get back to normal, we have to accept that normal is not going to be there anymore. So say you've lost your job and you've got two kids, you can't afford to put them in the school anymore, a private school. Well, maybe it means you have to move into a double wide on 5 acres of land and grow your own food. Like, we have to accept that there will be changes that have to happen like this. Um, my own personal experience is that back in the beginning of 2020, I was living in New York City. I had a business that I had spent the last 5 years building. I'd put my life's savings into it. I was working 100-hour work weeks to get this business off the ground, and I saw what was coming. I was chasing the dream. And we were very close. We had investors interested, all these things. I saw what was coming though. And I had to basically leave the business. I basically lost the business. Came back to Ohio. I wanted to be in a red state. Came back to Ohio, literally living with my mom, with my pregnant wife at that time, and thought I was going to have to file bankruptcy even. I made that change. I said, "Look, this world is not what I think it is anymore." And I saw these things coming, and so it was difficult. It was one of the most difficult times I've ever been through in my life, thinking that I basically had lost everything. I'd lost the last 5 years of my life's work, most of the money and property I had gone, and I went through this process of basically losing everything. But it was losing everything that allowed me to get to where I am today. And so for those of you that have lost a job, that maybe you're going to be losing a house, etc., you have to look at it and say, okay, where is God taking me? And there you'll be able to provide for yourself. Maybe to be honest, I'm living way out in the country now. I've got, some land I could afford, very affordable land to buy. And my life, I could not be happier. I'm farming. I'm building a greenhouse in a few weekends to get a greenhouse built so I can be gardening year round. Building, I want to have, goats and chickens, and I'm learning how to get back to that kind of lifestyle. It's brought me so much happiness, but the transition to get here was insanely difficult. So for those of you that are saying, look, I can no longer afford my house, etc. Look, sell your house for $200,000. You can probably in a rural area buy 10 acres of land and a little double wide. It's all you need. We don't need nearly as much as we thought we do. And actually, I find that when you have less, you're happier. Now, I want to also share something that is a little more personal, a little closer to the heart in terms of loss. So about 6 years ago, I lost my brother to cancer. My older brother, my best friend, living in New York with me, and we were truly best friends. It wasn't like, oh, it was my brother. It's like we were best friends. He was the closest person I had in my life, and there was medical malfeasance and a handful of things that led to basically 18 months of him suffering. And he eventually died of cancer. And during that period, so when it first happened, I was over in Hong Kong. I flew directly to the hospital and went, straight to the hospital to see him. Didn't go home for 3 months. I slept on the floor of the lobby in the hospital for 3 months straight, and then was basically living at the hospital for the next 6 months until, his wife and I got him out of the hospital back to her house, and then took care of him almost full time, until he passed. And I can tell you it was one of the most difficult things I've ever it was the most difficult thing I've ever gone through in my life. And not having any feeling of control, it was hell. I felt like I was in a prison camp. That was the best way to describe the feeling because he had, a massive brain injury caused. It was a medical error of the doctors, so he was paralyzed, having seizures. They told us he wouldn't wake up. I mean, it was on top of having cancer, he was on a heart machine, had kidney failure. It was like the whole 9 yards, and I was basically he and his wife and I were his full-time caretakers, changing the bed, changing him, administering even some of his medications for him. We didn't trust the nurses much. So, long story short, though, it was at that time I truly hit rock bottom because, especially after about 2 or 3 months of living in the hospital, I had nothing anymore. I didn't have my apartment. It just felt like even if it was there, I didn't get taken away from. I just didn't have it. All of the comforts I had in my life were stripped away from me. And so, for one, I got a lot closer to God during that time because I really, really realized the fragility of life at that time. But what also helped me is that I realized that, and this is really important because I think a lot of us are going through loss right now. You're losing a job, you're losing a family member, you're losing, a friend, your family stopped talking to you, your father may have passed away. A lot of us are going through these losses right now. What helped me more than anything was gratitude. And what changed the course of my life was at that point, I realized that all I could do was be thankful for what I had. I said, "Look, I have a healthy heart. It's pumping every day. I have healthy lungs giving me air. I have the ability to walk. I have the ability to stand. I have eyes to see, ears to hear. And so what I started doing was every morning I'd wake up at the hospital and spend maybe half an hour just focusing on all of the things that I was grateful for, focusing on all the things that I felt like I was blessed with. And I'll tell you what, even though it might feel like you're losing a lot right now, when you actually take time every day, even 5 minutes, to focus on what you have, to focus on your blessings, you might realize that, gosh, I was so worried about my house being taken. I've got two healthy kids. I was so worried about losing my job. I've got a beautiful wife that loves me. And that's what's really critical because us being able to realign ourselves again, this is about reframing what's happening right now. There are ways that we can reframe what's happening and look at things and say, you know what? It's not that bad. And it's really difficult, but we're purging the evil and you can see it. And when you watch them, they're scared. So that's a really important message. And I didn't really intend to get kind of so personal, but I feel like that right now we really have to be talking about these things. We have to be talking about how we can get through this because we have to keep our heads up. We have to keep our attitude positive. We have to look for opportunities. We have to believe in the future. We have to have hope for the future because I can tell you, and I've been there before, if you believe it's all going to end, if you believe that the evil has already won, if you believe that God has turned his back on us, if you believe that all of that stuff, then you will never get out of it. I promise you, you will be stuck in that until you end up taking your life or you die of an illness because your mind becomes so infected with that mentality. So we have to be able to see through these things. Now, something I'm nearing the end of the episode, and well, two things. One is that as I now do every time after I do my live shows on Thursdays, I finish up over on Rise TV for a more one-on-one Q&A, more personal talk, uncensored. I tell you what I really think about the jab and some of these things because Rise is completely uncensored. It's privately owned by patriots. So if you want to join me on Rise TV, there is a link in the description below for a free trial. You can come check it out. You don't have to commit to it. If you come on and then you end up canceling, it's okay. But you can come on there and watch me on there. You'll see it on the homepage. Rise TV is basically it's a patriot run company that is supposed, really our aim is to have it to be the, I guess you could say, the non-satanic version of Netflix. We've got all kinds of content. If you want to learn about a lot of what I talked about today in terms of the elites and the what the old world order, the bloodlines, there's a wealth of content on Rise TV all about the cabal. There's a huge amount of content on there about communism, etc. So you can check that out. But before I transfer over there, there's one video I wanted to end with, and this is a video that was done. I'll tell you the guy's name is at the beginning. I forget his name. Actually, produced the video, but he took some things that Joe Rogan was talking about as it relates to freedom, and so this is just a very powerful video to remind us of how important our freedom is and how much we have to fight for it. So I'm going to play this video for you, come back, say hello briefly, then jump over to Rise TV. So let me go and pull this up for you. I apologize in advance. It is Joe Rogan. He swears. He's not, he's not as kid friendly as I am. But you should watch this. So check out this video.
As soon as you give politicians power, any kind of power that didn't exist previously, if they can figure out a way to force you into carrying something that lets you enter businesses or lets you do this or lets businesses open, historically, they are not going to give that power up. They find new reasons to use it.
I'll be back.
We have to protect those freedoms at all costs, whether you agree with people's choices or not, because it is the foundation that this country was founded on. Freedom. This idea of freedom, there's so many people that think it's frivolous, it's not important, it's not the main thing that we should be focused on, but it is the literal structure that allows this country to be so fucking amazing. Every single country that's ever existed other than the United States, up until 1776, every fucking country that has ever existed was run by dictators, all of them. This is the first experiment in self-government that actually worked, and it created the greatest superpower the world's ever known. It created the greatest cultural machine, the greatest machine of art and creativity and innovation right fucking here. And how did it do that? It did it through freedom. And as soon as you see something, anything that comes along and inhibits your freedom, you should be very cautious of that thing. You should be very suspicious. Because anything that comes along that can inhibit your freedom is, by definition, anti-American.
There you go. I had to show you that video because I found that to be incredibly inspiring. Look, Joe Rogan's not someone I agree with 100%, as I talked about earlier, but he has a lot of very good principles that he talks about that he pushes. So I I hope that this show was a different format. I wasn't covering the news as much, but I really hope that as I intended to at the beginning, that I've really given you some hope towards things. I hope that I've helped reframe things. I hope that I've helped you realize how much power you have. If you are going through difficult times right now, maybe some things I've shared about my own kind of experience with that was helpful to you. I can tell you that I think that right now, if I had to say there's two things that are the most important for us to get through this, it's faith and gratitude. It's faith in God, faith that at the end, in the end, God wins, um, which I believe so. And if you look at there's all these different signs, especially if you look at the CCP and their coming collapse, everything. I do believe that God is in control. I believe that we're not being given tribulations that we weren't intended to be given. I don't believe that the evil have nearly as much control as that they want us to think that they do. And I also believe a lot in gratitude, as I talked about, that having gratitude is so important right now because what you focus on becomes your reality. What you focus on fills your mind, it fills your body, it fills your thoughts. If you can focus on the things that you have that are good, if you can focus on the beautiful things that you have in life, even when it seems like a lot of things have been taken away from you, you will be living the most rich, bountiful, happy life. I can promise you that if you can learn to focus on the good things that you have in your life. And I promise you, you have good things. If you're sitting here watching this show, well, you've got some sort of technology. You can afford that. You've got eyes to see. You've got ears to hear. Um, and hopefully you've got children or a family or friends or even your health. And so again, there's so much to be thankful for. So yeah, that's it for today's show. I'm going to jump back over to Rise TV now. If you want to check it out, it's risetv.com. You can go look at, there's a link in the description below for a free trial if you want to hop on over there. I'm going to take a second. I have to close off the other streams. So let me start by saying goodbye to my YouTube friends. Okay, bye-bye, YouTube friends. Thank you for joining me.